Hello and welcome to this lesson on demographics and sociology and how the study of population helps the study of sociology. So first things first, there are four main things that we need to be aware of. They're on the wall in the sociology room and in more detail on the wall in the sociology room. And they're also in your textbook. So if you've got a textbook near you, you might want to turn to page 198, which is where we're kind of going to start this little journey, and we're going to wander through to page 209. But really, the conversation is this. Birth rate massively affects how things are in a country. Having lots of babies provides issues. Not having enough babies provides issues. Death rate also massively impacts how wealthy, how affluent, and how able a country is to do stuff. Yeah, so birth rate plus death rate gives us in Britain a problem, which is an ageing population. Too many old crusties running around the place and using up resources. However, there's a really clever solution, and that clever solution is migration. The more migrants we have coming to this country and paying their way and paying their taxes means that there's more money going in, and we can afford the old crusties running around. Because old crusties are expensive. When they get ill, you fall over and break your leg, then you're going to be in hospital for a day, maybe a week if it's a really bad break, getting it pinned up and that kind of stuff. And then you're back at home 6 weeks later, you're playing rugby again. Old deer falls over and breaks their legs, and that's maybe a year to 2 years in hospital. So old deers are expensive. But we can sort that out with migration. So this is the story that I'm going to tell throughout this lesson. Birth rate we need to understand and be able to write about. Death rate we need to understand and be able to write about. An ageing population we need to be able to understand that and write about that. And we also need to understand migration. So cool little graph here showing the live births and deaths. In the UK, you can see that there are peaks and troughs. The sort of top line, the sort of light blue line, is our births. You can see there's a big spike in births after World War II, 1945. There's a big spike in births again another 20 years later. And then there's a slightly less spike 20 years after that, 25 years after that, and then you can see there's sort of a wave that's going through. And so the impact of World War II is still being felt. And to be fair, in Horsham, we're going through that sort of crest again. We're sort of rising up, and the amount of babies coming through into our education system is getting more and more and more. We've had that trough, and now we've got that sort of peak that's rising on through. You can see that deaths are more steady, but again, World War II, there's a bit more deaths, and you have that kind of situation going through. But I suppose on both of those fronts, we can say that there are less people being born today, and we can say that there are less people dying today. Yeah, we can have a conversation on both of those kind of things. Here we can look at the sort of total fertility rate, which is a far more useful number. We'll talk about that more in lessons, but that is pretty much the bottom red line. How many babies are the average woman having in Britain? And in Britain, around about now, it's about 1.6, thereabouts. Yeah, 2 is an ideal number. Yeah, well, to be fair, 2.1 is an ideal number. And I wonder if you can work out and maybe write in your notes why a total fertility rate of 2.1, the average woman in Britain having 2.1 children, is the perfect number. 1.6 leads to an ageing population. We've got an ageing population. An ageing population is a real problem that we're going to have to sort out. So the first idea we're going to look at is birth rate. Okay, so the first idea we're going to have to look at is birth rate. Now, on the surface of it, this might look complicated, but really what we're saying here is that women's position in society has changed. That women are no longer baby factories. Women are no longer stay-at-home mums who are looking after the kids. Excuse me, looking after the kids and sorting things out. Women are independent, amazing, don't have to adhere to anything, can be whatever they want to be, can do whatever they want to do. So therefore, what we've found in our history is that women are leaving getting married and leaving having children till later. Now that has its own problems. I suppose from a biological point of view, I'm not saying do this by any stretch of the imagination, but from a biological point of view, 16, 17, 18 is probably the best age to have a baby, because your body will rebound the quickest. It's still quite rubbery. Having the baby is a pretty big shock from a biological point of view, and then recovering from that is quicker the younger you are. And you're probably your most fertile around about 18. So it's easier to get pregnant at that kind of age. The older you leave it, the less fertile you get. And the older you leave it, the more complications you might have. So that's kind of led to things like fertility rates declining. And that's kind of led to having less children and having a more sort of child-centred kind of idea. When we think about children, when I'm thinking about children, I'm kind of thinking about mortality rate. Hardly any babies die anymore being babies, which didn't used to be the case. I'm thinking that children are an economic liability. They are bloody expensive, yeah. But our culture has absolutely locked into this child-centred idea. Everything is sort of children first, and children get protected by loads of laws and all of this kind of stuff. So again, all of those things sort of rolled in together, the change in the position of women, and how children have changed, so future mortality, liability, child-centeredness, has led us to have smaller families. Our dependency ratio, has absolutely come down, in terms of that. So when I'm talking about a dependency ratio, I'm kind of talking about the number of people who are working in your household, specifically your household, and the number of people who aren't working gives you the dependency ratio. If you've got your wife and you, and you're both working, then you don't really have any dependence. So there's no dependency ratio. If you have a working mum and there are 6 children, then it's 1 to 6 is what the dependency ratio is. 1 working person to 6 non-working people. Yeah. So again, an ideal number would probably be 2 to 2, I suppose. 2 people working, 2 people not working. And then you're sort of providing for each other. If that dependency ratio gets out of whack, then it provides massive issues for our society. Let's think about fertility rates. It's a real problem for men, fertility rates is at the moment. This is going to be a little bit disgusting, so prepare yourself for it being a little bit disgusting. But if you drink a glass of water in the city of London, lovely city that London is, then you're going to be drinking water that's probably been through 7, 6 other human beings. Drunk, gone to the toilet, processed in a water purification plant, come back again, 6 or 7 times. Now there's one thing that our filtration things don't get rid of, and that's estrogen. And if you know anything about estrogen, the contraceptive pill, which lots of women are on, and quite rightly too, amazing invention, possibly one of the greatest inventions for women that there possibly has ever been, because it allows women to be like men in terms of choose when they want to have children or choose whether they want to have children or not, and it's completely up to them and nobody needs to know that they're taking the contraceptive pill. So it's a real game changer and a real amazing invention in terms of that contraceptive pill. But estrogen goes into your wee. When you wee it out, we don't get it out. So men are drinking water with estrogen in it. Now, you might say, well, what's the problem with that? Well, if I wanted to have a sex change, I don't want to have a sex change, but if I did, then they'd give me estrogen tablets to take, and it'd stop my facial hair growing, it'd put weight down on certain parts of my body, it'd make my voice go higher. So one of the byproducts is that it'd stop my sperm production, which would be an issue if I wanted to have any more children. So fertility rates are going down around the world. Now, why do we want to talk about this as sociology? This is just facts. These are facts that anybody knows. Well, because sociology is about how society works, then we have this thing in sociology where we're very interested in social policies, laws that affect how things are and who things are. So when I'm thinking about social policies, I want to be aware of a declining birth rate because I need to be aware of things like schools. Do I need more school places? Do I need less school places? Yeah. Do I need to put on more healthcare, less healthcare? Do I need more child doctors or less child doctors? Knowing what the birth rate is doing is going to help me run my country better, help me provide better and more effective healthcare. And it's also going to help me know if there's going to be an ageing population. And an ageing population is really important to understand because it is expensive. And those old people aren't going to be paying their taxes because they've paid their taxes and they've retired. So they're not paying taxes. It's the working people that are paying taxes. And if we don't have enough working people, if we don't have enough people paying taxes, then everybody suffers as a consequence. So understanding a declining birth rate is really important. Now again, moving on to death rate. Now again, thinking about death rate, we've got it's really a celebration. Both birth rate and death rate should be a massive celebration for us because both of them are in decline. We're having less babies, that's good, and people are living longer. That's good. Why are people living longer? Again, we've got things like improved nutrition, loads. We know far more about healthy eating. Well, there is an obesity crisis that's going on, but we seem to be having on the sort of knife edge of that obesity crisis. Having a conversation now about how to live healthier, how to be healthier, what we should be doing, eating more nuts, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, we have huge medical improvements, absolutely massive medical improvements that happen all the time. One of my friends is a top heart doctor up in the City of London. And I went to see him maybe about 10 years ago now. But when I went to see him 10 years ago, I went to see him do a heart operation. Now, in the old days, 20 years ago, they would crack your entire rib cage, pull it apart, get in and play with your heart. And the recovery from that was 6 months to a year recovering from that operation. Nowadays, they do a little cut in your stomach, go up a vein, play around in your heart like using Nintendo, and the recovery from that is a couple of weeks. So amazing medical improvements. Public health is getting better. We don't smoke as much. Our diet's better. Life expectancy is going up and up and up. People are living lots longer. Now, we do have to be aware as good sociologists that there's a class issue involved here, just like there has been with the pandemic that we've had recently. The richer you are, the more likely you are to benefit from these things. The poorer you are, the less likely you are to benefit from these things. So that's a bit of an issue. And we need to be aware of that. Why do we need to be aware of it? Very similar to birth rate. We need to be thinking about policies, we need to be thinking about laws, we need to be thinking about how these things affect our society, and therefore do we need to pass laws to mitigate the impact of these kind of ideas. So hopefully on your worksheet now you've filled in your bit about birth rate and you've used the textbook to help you. You've filled in your bit about death rate and you've used the textbook and the other resources that you've had shared with you to help you in that kind of situation. And this brings us to our problem, an ageing population. And this is a really good diagram of an ageing population. You can see that the black line is what the population used to look like in 2005, and now in 2015 you can see what the actual population is. So you can see that there are slightly more women than there are men in Britain. You can see that there's sort of little dips around the sort of 15 kind of area and around the 40 kind of area, and then you've got the sort of bigger crests of the waves that are happening. But you can absolutely see on the whole we are getting older. The gap between the black line and where the blue or the orange line actually ends, you can see that there are more people. So we have an ageing population, and that's a problem. Why is an ageing population a problem in our society? We absolutely have to worry about one-person households. Why do we have to worry about one-person households? Because most of our housing stock is geared up for families. But if we've got one person living in a 4-bedroom house, which happens with an ageing population, then that's sort of clogging up the housing stock in Britain, and Britain isn't a sort of, how do I want to say this? It's kind of a congested place. It's a small island with lots of people living on it, so we don't really have the wherewithal to be able to deal with that kind of situation. The dependency ratio, having to care for older people, not wanting to put people in homes and caring for them ourselves, again is an issue, and therefore that puts a massive strain in our country on public services. The NHS and care homes and care provision and occupational therapists and all that kind of stuff is costing the country millions, if not billions, in terms of resources and time and all of that kind of stuff. So this ageing population, we've not dealt with this well. We don't have a culture in our country of looking after our olds. What we do with our olds is we put them in a care home, and then those care homes are there to make money, and so those care homes cut corners. The NHS has been underfunded for the last 30 or 40 years, so it's not been given the right amount of money to be able to do the things that it should be able to do. So therefore those public services are a massive strain is being put on them. But we also, because we're sociologists, we need to understand about ageism, and we need to understand about old age in a modern context and old age in a post-modern context. So modernism, postmodernism, and inequality. So when we're thinking about ageism, we're thinking about one of the consequences of an ageing population in modern societies is the growth of ageism. People don't like olds because we don't live in big family groups, and we probably just live in little nuclear families. We don't have much in contact with old people, and therefore we view them with suspicion, and they view you with suspicion. So real problem in terms of our culture. But also when we're thinking about a postmodern society, and we're thinking people like Hunt, I suppose, is a good example of this. That in the world that we live in now, do we really care about what age we are, or how old we are, or any of those kind of things? I just read the other day, you might know about Formula One, but Bernie Ecclestone, he's about 90, has just had his 4th child with his 3rd wife, I think it is. Is that a problem? Is that not a problem? Again, in the postmodern world that we live in, he could do whatever he wants. If he can find somebody that wants to be with him and they want to have children together, then he can do whatever he wants. So Hunt is bringing us a very interesting kind of idea. But Pilcher argues very effectively that there are inequalities in things like class and gender that happen within the old. So it's fine growing old if you can afford it, and it's fine growing old if you're a woman. But if you're a man and you're poor, then it's not so good being old. So there is still lots of inequalities. So again, we have this policy implication, and it's one of the main things in this topic that we have these policy implications. So people like Donald Hirsch argue that a number of important social policies will need to change in our world. We'll need to work longer. So you guys are probably going to be working until you're 85. You're not going to be able to retire at 60 like some of your parents will do. We're going to need to pay more for our health care. Again, your parents won't have paid anything for their health care other than the national insurance contributions that they give. But you will see a huge change in this field over the next 20 or 30 years of your life because of the way we haven't dealt with this situation in the last 20 or 30 years. So the solution to the problem of declining birth rate, declining death rate, therefore leading to an ageing population, is migration. So I think we need to have a little conversation here about where do people come from who come to Britain. So that's them immigrants coming to Britain, and then where do people go to from Britain? Emigrants or emigration. Yeah, so we'll have a conversation about both of those ideas before we get into this as a topic. So here we have a map. There's a little arrow that points to Britain. It's a little bit fuzzy. Sometimes when you get pictures in like this, then they are a little bit fuzzy. It is deliberately upside down. It's what we call a Peterson's projection. So it shows all the countries in the right sort of size and shape, and it gives you an indication of how small Britain is compared to the rest of the world and how small America is. Often America is painted as being this really big country, yeah, and how huge Russia is, yeah, and that's the one at the bottom left. But the four areas, that I've circled on this map are the historical places where people have come to the United Kingdom. Okay, so after World War II, we were rebuilding Britain. And this isn't to say that people didn't migrate to Britain before this, but the sort of big amounts of migrant people coming to Britain after World War II, they came from the Caribbean, so that's a circle on the right. They came from Southern Africa, that's the circle at the top. They came from India, which now is separated into India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. And they came from China, but more specifically Hong Kong, the circle on the left. So that's kind of what happened after World War II. And we've had strong connections with those areas ever since. Now, I've put in the top right of this slide that the 5 biggest countries today that we have a population in Britain from those countries are China, number 1, India, Poland, USA, Australia are the big 5 that we've drawn people into. In fact, Poland is by far the largest single ethnic group that is not British living in Britain. Okay, interesting fact. Since we joined the European Union, however, we've had an influx of Eastern European countries, as I've already said, primarily Poland, and as you can see there, that in 2015 there was just under 1 million Polish people living and working in Britain. Yeah, not illegal immigrants. They were working hard, paying taxes, being proper citizens, and the kind of people that we want to be in Britain. In India, as in Indians, people from the Indian subcontinent, there are about 316,000, so about a third of a million in 2015. So really what I'm saying to you is, in Britain we've had 2 waves really. One wave after World War II where we invited people to come to Britain to help rebuild, and then there was another wave after 1979 in the European Union, but primarily 2004 and 2007 where we had the freedom of movement, where people came from Poland and Eastern Europe. Okay, so where do people go to from the United Kingdom? Well, there are the countries there. You might know them just by the shape of them. But we have Australia, top left, number 1 destination for English people. Then we have France and Spain, pretty similar destinations for English people. And then we have the United States of America on the right. They are the big 4 drawers, people who move from Britain to those countries. So I've kind of said that migration is the solution. We want to encourage more people to come to Britain. We need to encourage more people to come to Britain because we only have that 1.6 total fertility rate. We're not replacing our population. So therefore our population is getting older, it's getting more expensive, and that means it's harder for younger people to get jobs, it's harder for younger people to have money, and all of those kind of things. So migration is a really good thing to happen. And wouldn't you know, around the world it is accelerating. Okay, it is accelerating around the world. That we have this kind of idea that there is migration is on the up, 33% on the up around the world. But there is this differentiation. Okay, this differentiation to do with migration. Yeah, there are many types of migrants that happen in our world. We have migrants that come as spouses of people who've gone to that country before. There are people who are running away from wars. There are people who are running away from natural disasters. There are economic migrants who want a better life in a new country, and therefore they want to go to that new country to get a job and those kind of things. So there is lots and lots of different reasons. And somebody like Vortevek talks about this super diversity that we have in our world. Yeah, that we're not just British. Yeah, that we might be Pakistani. British Pakistani, we might be a British Hindu, we might be a British Sikh, we might be a British Jamaican, we might be a British Jamaican who has roots in America. Yeah, we might come from Zimbabwe. Yeah, there's so many different places. There are Russian speakers amongst our population in Colliers. Yeah, there are people from the Ukraine. There are people from Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia in Colliers, and so therefore we have this huge diversity. Where at first glance you might look and sound British, whatever that means, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Not talking about colour there in any way, shape or form, but you might look and sound British, but then your heritage, yeah, might be something else that adds to this idea of super diversity. But then the media that you consume, again, might add to that idea of super diversity. So Cohen brings a sort of class difference. Cohen talks about three different types of migrant, I suppose. Yeah, he talks about citizens. Citizens are somebody who has full voting rights in a country. They're bona fide. They should be here. They've got a passport that is British. They might have a passport for another country as well. But a citizen is somebody who plays an active part in the world and in the country that they've chosen to live in. A denizen, on the other hand, yeah, these are privileged foreign nationals, people like Roman Abramovich, who owns Chelsea, people like I can't think of any more off the top of my head, but foreign people from foreign countries who can come and go as they please because they add a lot to Britain as a country. In terms of Roman Abramovich, he runs businesses in this country, and therefore our government comes to an arrangement with him. So that is a denizen. And then we have a helot, yeah, or a helot, and helots are the exploited group. So this is people who come to this country to work, yeah, but they're probably not on the books anywhere. They probably are illegal immigrants. They probably have family connections, and they come here to earn money, cash in hand, and maybe send some of that money back to the country where they come from. We do need to be aware when we're thinking about migration that it has a political dimension to it. And hopefully you've been aware of that over the whole Brexit conversation. I'm not going to go into the Brexit conversation on here. It still upsets me as an idea. But you are aware that migration and the controlling of borders is very much a political issue. We need to be aware of the feminisation of migration. In the 1940s and 1950s, it tended to be men that went from places like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and they moved around the globe to get money and then came back again in terms of migration. Now we tend to find that, especially in the healthcare situations, and especially in Britain and the healthcare situation, that women are doing that kind of role now. It's women that are leaving their homes and leaving their cultures and leaving their countries to earn the money to help the families where they come from. So you have situations where women will go and be nurses in Britain from Indonesia for 10 years, save as much money as they possibly can to send home, and then go home and live a better standard of life as a result of that kind of conversation. Okay. The final thing that we need to be aware of is migrant identities. Okay. And so we all have multiple sources of identity, as I've been saying, to do with families and friends and neighbourhoods and ethnicity and religion and nationality, and they all give us a sense of belonging. Okay, and so you do have this kind of migrant identity and this hybrid identity that I've already alluded to in this conversation. But a sociologist like John Eade found that second-generation Bangladeshi Muslims in Britain created their own hierarchical identities, and they saw themselves as Muslim first, then Bengali, then British. So that's a very complicated set of identities to unpack in the British world. And I wonder how many white British people would understand that and would be sympathetic towards that. As a sociologist, I kind of believe that because I'm white, and that's kind of the dominant culture in Britain, I have more change in my pockets than an ethnic minority group. So therefore it's my responsibility to make Britain a welcoming, warm country to those ethnic minority groups. And it's my responsibility to make sure that they understand how to fit in, and help them understand how to fit in, and help them get British culture and help them assimilate into British culture. Yeah, that it's our responsibility as a country to help people to fit in. So therefore we have a more homogenous, law-abiding, everybody getting on kind of culture. And that kind of comes from this migrant identities. I wonder how good Britain has been at doing that kind of thing. If you've got any questions, you can email those questions to any of your teachers, or you can ask questions in lessons, which is by far the best thing to do. So I hope this has helped you. I hope you've got a better idea of what this topic is about, and I hope that you will come to lessons primed with lots of interesting questions to ask your teachers.